Sofia Coppola became a household name in directing after releasing her first film, The Virgin Suicides, in 1999. We discussed her and her filmmaking career in depth on our podcast this week, but here is an excerpt of our discussion of that very first film, The Virgin Suicides.
So, babe, Virgin Suicides, what did you think of this one?
All right, right off the bat, I watched this twice. I watched this about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. And I watched it again yesterday because I love this film.
I knew nothing about this film, like actually nothing. And I watched it yesterday, and I was really, really surprised. I really loved this film.
It's really good, right?
Like, I don't know what I was expecting, but it really subverted my expectations, too, from the beginning. I was engaged the entire time.
Whole time, like, I couldn't look away. It was just brilliant, yeah.
So before we kind of dive into the more specifics, what was this film about?
So, as an overview of the film, there is a family called the Lisbons, mom, dad, and 5 sisters. And the film opens very early on with the youngest sister committing suicide. Then the rest of the film, it doesn't involve a lot of that. It's sort of like the remnants of this family and their lives throughout this particular summer, where there's like love and drama. It's told from the perspective of these boys who are obsessed with the Lisbon girls, and then eventually there's a crackdown and it becomes too much, and all of the sisters commit suicide.
Shocking scene, which I want to discuss it later.
Oh my god, it's crazy. So yeah, we'll have to go through this film. There's so much to say.
Okay, so the beginning, I love how it starts. You have like the fantastic bright suburbia
Shot in Toronto.
Really?
Filmed in Toronto as a stand-in for, I believe, Detroit.
Wow.
I know, crazy.
The color grading, I thought, perfectly captured the essence of the time.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, this is late 70s, early 80s, sort of, you know what I mean?
It's amazing how just like that honeyed light glinting through trees and stuff just takes you back like 40, 50 years, right?
I know, I was immediately captivated, and then the fucking cut from the joyful music to the dull, gray, bluish bathroom.
It is one of those films where like every frame kind of is a painting.
Yeah.
And they have such distinct and gorgeous color palettes.
But I thought, what a great way to start the film. You know exactly what it's going to be about.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, the film's going to have happy moments, but it's also going to be a fucking tragedy.
Yeah.
And then what I love is the great narration the film has. I love how we're seeing the past, but it's narrated from the perspective of someone with time, has had so much time to reflect on this, still can't get it out of their mind.
Still can't work it out, right?
It's so brilliant, and I love at the very start, the film tells us, literally the narrator tells us, this is how it's going to end.
Yeah.
But we don't know how it's going to happen, and I think, personally, I forgot,
right? You're watching through the middle of the film and you forget.
Like, everything is like, oh, this is going to be fantastic, everything's okay.
Yeah.
And then, oh. So, in the bathroom, Cecilia attempts, but she doesn't die. And so they take her to a therapist who's Danny DeVito.
Danny friggin' DeVito.
He's so young in this.
I know, it's crazy. So first off, his name in the film, his doctor name is E.M. Horniker, which if you put that name alongside Ongo Gablovian
or Mantis
and Mantis Toboggan, I would not be able to pick out which was the one that wasn't from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh man.
It just sounds like one of his made up names. Also, you know when he's showing her the ink splotches?
Yeah.
The first one he flips over looks like the Batman logo. And I really want to make an edit where he's the Penguin and he flips it over and the Batman theme starts playing.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's a very brief cameo. He worked with Francis Ford Coppola on a film, which is part of why he's in here.
John Grisham's The Rainmaker.
There's nothing more thrilling than nailing an insurance company.
There are a lot of cameos from Francis alumni. It was delightful to see him, though.
It was great. It was great. And so that kind of leads into this thing where everyone is trying to figure out why she attempted suicide.
Yeah.
But no one actually knows why.
Mm-hmm.
So they kind of throw this party, and the fucking slicked back hair Italian kid.
Okay, that is Robert Schwartzman, the
Wow.
brother of Jason Schwartzman. It's so funny. He's like the punch scene where he's like making eyes at the mom.
I know.
He's crawling through sewers into
Yeah.
people's basements.
That
like
was such a weird thing to have, but I love how they have this stuff in the film.
he's the son of Sammy the Shark or something.
Yeah, and he never comes back.
Never
He's
comes
in, like,
back.
that one scene.
I know, and I just love the idea of this kid like sneaking into people's basements through the sewers, just covered in shit. It just made me imagine like this person waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and they open the door, and he's standing there, buck naked, T-posing, covered in shit. Yeah, he's great.
Another interesting thing is that, like, immigrant kid
Right, yes,
who
yes.
jumps off the second floor of his neighbor's roof.
His name's Dominic. Call him Dominic Sunglasses.
And he declares his love for this girl who moves to, like, Sweden.
I love her.
I love her. And then the fact that he mouths it before he jumps, and then he jumps, and you're like, oh shit, well, he broke his legs. He just gets up
He gets
completely
up.
fine.
I have a note here. It just says Dominic Sunglasses is a fucking legend and a gay icon. Because when he jumps off the side, I don't know if you noticed, he's wearing this polo shirt, and the pocket, it's not quite like the pride flag.
I thought that was the Italian flag.
Fuck. It probably is.
Faded.
All Italians are gay icons. I'm so stupid.
You're so fucking stupid.
But yeah,
Faded's like, wow, the gay representation in this film.
but yeah, he's so good, and like that's one of the things this film does really well is like sprinkling in comedy.
Yeah.
And then just intercutting between comedy and like the darkest of topics.
Well, what's interesting too is I actually think those segments serve the plot of the film.
They do, yeah.
I noticed the comparison between Dominic and Cecilia.
Okay.
Cecilia dies and gets impaled on one of like the fence
Yeah.
spikes, and she jumps from the second floor like the immigrant
Just
kid.
like him, yeah.
He jumps to show proof of his love. And I thought was interesting is in the party scene, everyone ignores Cecilia.
Yeah.
Except Joe, who's like this. I think he has Down syndrome.
Yeah.
What I found interesting is when Joe actually first says hi, her eyes light up. Like,
right.
oh my god,
someone
someone's
actually speaks to her. I mean, like, she's treated like a ghost.
Yeah.
Like, immediately.
And later in the film, she literally is a ghost.
She literally is a ghost. Like you said, the contrast between her and Dominic, he jumps and he just kind of gets up and walks away.
Yeah.
And she is impaled on this fence. Like,
Well, also, it's interesting because in the party, everyone is flirting with the other sisters.
Yep.
And she's the only one not being flirted with. And so, Dominic, he was like, I know who my true love is.
Yeah.
And he's jumping to confess that love. She was almost jumping because she doesn't have one. And what's interesting, too, is whenever they're kind of talking about Cecilia, they intercut these clips and narration of Kirsten Dunst and all the boys talking about, oh my god, she's so hot. And
Yeah,
I thought
obsessed.
I thought it was so interesting because, again, the comparison.
yeah, because I mean, like, within, I want to say 15 minutes of Cecilia's death, like, she's forgotten by
Yeah.
the boys.
Yeah.
They're obsessed with Lux and the rest of the sisters, and she's, like, barely mentioned at all.
Interesting how, like, the boys all forget about her, because at the end of the film, when everyone commits suicide, the boys are frustrated because it's like everyone forgets about the rest of the sisters.
Yeah.
It's almost becoming like a lesson learned to them.
It's fascinating.
Cecilia actually tells everyone why she commits suicide.
Yeah.
She says, it's because I'm a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And everyone else is like,
It's
oh.
dismissed. It's played off as like a joke almost, like an exaggeration.
Yeah, it's serious.
Yeah.
And it solidifies how all the males try to understand why they commit suicide. They try to understand the mental state, but don't actually listen. No one listens in this film.
No.
They actually quote on this. One of the boys say, they knew everything about us, but we couldn't fathom them at all.
Yeah. It's when they're reading the diary and the boys start collecting like artifacts from the girls, like lash curlers and
Photos.
stuff that they've thrown away, like this junk, trying to understand them. And it's amazing how they've like reflected on this time so much, and yet they just don't understand at all, and they don't really want to.
No, yeah.
Right? Like they glamorize them.
There's a sensationalism, and that starts when Miss Pearl from Channel 2 News comes to the house, and she's actually pretty much one of the only other female characters who actually talks to the Lisbon girls.
Yeah.
And immediately from the start, she does something none of the other male characters try to do. She tries to fucking personalize with them.
A little bit, yeah.
It's very brief. It's like 5 seconds, but she asks the question, what did your sister like doing? And they said she loves writing in her diary, and then immediately it's turned around and becomes a media kind of
Exactly.
phenomenon.
Like it seems kind of genuine, or maybe, you know, she's interested, and then it's
Yeah.
turned around and it's like it's monetized or whatever, right?
She essentially stains Cecilia's memory. People saying the girl would never become anything.
Yeah. Cecilia like becomes a face for like this national awareness thing.
Yeah.
Instead of like a person.
It affects the other girls too, because all the other males are start being like, oh, do the Lisbon sisters have symptoms of like detachment?
Exactly. Like everyone's watching them. And again, they just become like these ethereal beings.
By spreading awareness, it did more damage.
It did more damage. It's just so fascinating that like they're worshipped, right? But they're like toys.
They're literally treated as objects throughout the film.
Yeah.
They're treated like these goddesses, and part of that I think is kind of the clothes that they wear. A lot of
white gowns.
The white gowns, the dresses the mother makes for the dance is very like I want to say early kind of Christian attitudes.
Part of the way it's shot makes them feel very ghost-like throughout the film, in a way that's like they're almost already dead.
Yeah, I didn't expect this to be in this film. Those brief documentarian confessionals.
Yes, it's weird. They're sprinkled throughout. It's not quite a documentary.
No.
But we get stuff with adult Trip Fontaine.
We get stuff with the kids outside the steps of the school being like, oh, what did you think of
Lux? Yeah. We also get like a little bit from the mum at the end. She gives like this little bit of voiceover that's like, I just don't know what went wrong. There was so much love in the house or whatever. And that also feels like it was maybe taken in the present day or something.
Yeah.
It's weird, but it works.
And that leads into Trip Fontaine. I want to talk about him a lot.
There's so much to say about Trip Fontaine. Holy shit.
Right from the get-go, I really liked how they do his introduction, how they did the same thing they did with Kirsten Dunst's Lux.
Yeah.
How it's like showing all the girls are in love with him, how Lux had all the boys in love with him, making him kind of like
he's like a weird reflection of her, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite the same, but there are similarities.
There are similarities for sure, yeah. When Trip comes into the movie, this is when I noted kind of a genre change. Because before it was kind of very like, not gritty, but it was very much serious drama. You know, we're trying to figure out what's becoming of these girls, the suicides, you know.
He pulls focus, right? He becomes like
focus.
A main character in it, basically.
And when he pulls focus, the movie shifts from this drama to like this teen kind of love story.
Yeah.
And everything is normal. And part of that reason is, I don't know if you noticed this, during his sequence, there's no narration.
Yeah, there's no narration, and it works in the documentary because I think they are talking to him.
Yeah,
right. Like it's almost this is Trip's section of looking back because they're speaking to him in the present day at like a place where you go after you get addicted to drugs and stuff.
That was so interesting.
And so this Trip section doesn't have a lot of narration because I think it's him looking back on it from this perspective that the boys never got at the time.
And then the narration only begins again after Trip and Lux they have sex and Trip leaves Lux in the field. And then Lux comes back home in taxi, and then the parents are like, where were you? The color palette shifts to these...
It's crazy. It gets darker.
Dark grays and blues, and then the narration starts up again. And that's when you're like, oh fuck, we're back to the actual film.
The glamour is gone.
Yeah.
This haze that was over the film
the joy
disappears.
of life. And it has like this dance scene, you know, people are making out, they're drinking, smoking weed, they're all having fun.
Probably the happiest any of the girls are is at like the homecoming dance, right?
Yeah.
Even then, the tone shifts a lot during that homecoming dance. It gets kind of depressing, and then with just a simple music change and a little bit of a tone shift, the party like ramps back up.
It's interesting because Trip's purpose in the film is, again, like you said, to show Lux, yes, there is a sense of freedom.
Yeah.
But again, I also think it is to make them forget about what's going to happen.
I know. It lures you in. And then after Trip leaves, the film shifts again. And I think, again, the biggest thing I can say about it is that the Lisbon girls are like ghosts.
Because the girls get locked down. They're not allowed to leave the house. They get forced out of school.
Yeah.
The dad gets fired from his job.
Yeah, because he's going crazy.
That's something I want to talk about actually briefly. The dad and the mom's relationship. Because I actually think the dad liked when the girls socialized.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when the party happens, he's talking to the boys about like, oh, this model plane. He seems very eager to have another presence in the house.
Well, he seems to want to socialize too, exactly.
And I do think the dad still is at fault because he can't speak up for himself.
100%, yeah.
But the mom is very like, you can't talk to boys, you can't have parties.
Super conservative. But what I really like about it is that the film does a good job of not making her an over-the-top villain. She still feels very natural. There are times in the film where she like defends the girls or has like conversations with them.
Part of that I actually think is because of perspective.
It could be perspective, yeah.
I think if this film was from the girl's perspective, she would 100% be the villain.
Yeah.
But because it's from the boy's perspective, and because they're clueless, because the reason they commit suicide is essentially, there's two reasons. One of the reasons I want to get into a bit later.
Mm-hmm.
The main reason is the controlling nature of their mother. And the boys can't see that.
Yeah.
They think like, oh, it's not the mother, you know, it's just like, there's mystery. reality, right?
Yeah, I think that's an important perspective to show is like, of course the mother like isn't always screaming and yelling and like locking the door and stuff. Like, you know, when the girls rush out to protect their tree, the mom is like, you know, they're just standing on their own front lawn, right? She's like on their side.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to show because that's part of the manipulation.
You win some battles together, but then it's about conquering them in other ways, controlling them in other ways.
Exactly. Like, she's not an evil mother in the sense that she doesn't want these kids. She's just terrible at doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really important distinction to make. It makes her way more like dangerous. They pass this judgment onto Trip, and yet they completely lack self-awareness. There's this great part earlier in the film to highlight their lack of self-awareness, right? They're reading the Lisbon girl's diary,
Yeah.
and one of them, who they call the Brains, his name I believe is Tim Weiner, and he's analyzing it, and he's looking at, he's like, look at the dots above the eyes. They're scattered everywhere. She's clearly like a dreamer, right? And so they're sort of over analyzing the book. And one of the things that Tim Weiner says is that, you know, these girls are dreamers. They're completely out of touch with reality. So ironic at that point in time when they are literally like dreaming about the girls based on these like tiny items scattered around.
And then later on in the film, they see what catalogs the girls order. They order the same catalogs, and they collectively dream about what their lives.
You want to talk about
girls.
out of touch with reality?
They fucking dream that Cecilia's still alive and like she's like a bride and stuff.
Yeah,
It's so weird.
It's gross.
Yeah.
Complete lack of self-awareness.
One of the sequences I love during the lockdown, because we're on the topic,
Yeah.
the communication sequence with the records.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? They're communicating over telephone, like through music. I guess so that if the mom picks up the phone, they'll just hear the music.
Yeah.
And they're using the lyrics of the song to communicate. And from that point on, the girls kind of communicate with the boys through like little notes and stuff. They're like, will you help us? They use Morse code. And you can see the girls in these like white gowns behind white curtains from the other side of the room.
They're
at
like
night.
semi-transparent too.
They're like fucking ghosts. I'm telling you, right? And so eventually the boys go to like drive them away and drive them to freedom, right? They go into the Lisbon house at night.
Oh my god.
This scene it changed my brain chemistry the first time I watched it.
Basically, there's a girl hanging, and you just see her feet, her socks, and a bit of her skirt, and it's just like, holy fuck.
Yeah, and the boys just like, they run. And as they run past another set of feet.
By, and then oh my god, it was shocking.
It's crazy. It's crazy. The group suicide is...
And I knew it was coming. I just didn't expect it at that moment. And they trick you too. Because as soon as they're like talking about like, oh, who's gonna steer? Who's gonna sit next to me?
Exactly.
They cut to their fake road trip that they're dreaming
and
about.
I watched this with my girlfriend like a couple of weeks ago. And she got thrown off guard by that scene because she was like, oh, did they actually get away?
And they trick you too because the fucking narration is in the future. So you think, oh, this is what's gonna happen.
Could it be happening? Like, this whole time you forgot about the suicides too.
I thought the suicide was gonna happen on the road trip.
Yeah, and then it just happens, and like, it's crazy as well because Lux is there to greet them, so you're like, you get tricked as well. You're like, oh, well, Lux is alive, right? The other girls must just be getting ready, all that stuff. You know what's interesting? I read this on the IMDb trivia. I haven't actually gone back to look, but you know they take a picture before the homecoming dance? The dad takes it, and Lux, there's like something dripping on her, and Lux like puts her hand up, and like the picture isn't very good.
Yeah.
What someone was saying is that the picture actually represents the different ways they die. Because apparently Lux's hand is up in a position kind of like when she's holding the cigarette in the car. Another one of the girls, her eyes are closed. Maybe it's the oven. Another girl, she has her hand up, like scratching her back, and it kind of looks like a noose.
Oh my god.
I have to go back and look, but like, unbelievable foreshadowing.
And so after the suicides, the family moves away, the house is sold, everyone kind of forgets about what happens. There's this stain left on the town, but the boys remember. And then they have a fucking, what was it, asphyxiation party?
It's so different from the rest of the film. There's suddenly this green tint because there's some kind of algae problem
in the swamp.
And so they have this party where everyone's wearing gas masks, and it's got this like Matrix kind of toxic green tint over the party.
Also, what was interesting too, in the party scene, the boys seem like they're the only ones of that age. Everyone else seems like they're all adults. And I was like, could this be actually in the future?
In the future, in the present. Like, I'm not 100% clear on like how far in the future it is, like when it takes place, but it's so creepy.
And then there's like this guy who fake drowns in the pool, and
he's like, I'm a teenager, I've got problems or whatever.
Basically, part of the reason they committed suicide was because they were girls. It's not their fault at all. And it's not because of the way they were born, but it's because their treatment of the fact that they were girls. And so, I don't know if you noticed this. Moments before the collective suicide, Lux actually decides if she wants to kill herself or not.
Yeah.
You know when the boys are steering, they're asking, oh, are you gonna steer? Are you gonna let me steer? Who wants to sit next to me? And the boys are just doing whatever Lux says.
Yeah.
She basically is testing to see how shallow they are.
Right.
And part of this, I think the entire reason they commit suicide is because they essentially are treated like objects. Everyone doesn't care actually about who they are, about their personalities, their interests, and I think that's shown in the perspective of the film. All they care about are these conquests. And if you think about it, Trip left essentially because he was like, I did her. I have nothing else to gain.
The only reason he wanted her in the first place was because she was the only girl who wouldn't, like, immediately fawn over him.
And same with the other boys.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason they committed suicide is because they were just treated so shallowly. And even the fact that when Lux starts hooking up with those random boys on the roof, she's just basically just trying to test, can I just get anyone from my sexuality?
Yeah, and this one guy who works at like a burger joint, they go and interview him later, and he's like, she asked me, like, do you really like me? And I didn't say anything because you got to keep girls guessing and stuff.
And I didn't catch this. After they say, can I take the wheel? Can I sit up front? And all the boys are agreeing. When Lux says, I'm going to go wait in a car, apparently you can see a tear in her eye, and the light actually fades in her eyes.
Yeah, that can be read a whole bunch of different ways. Obviously, she knows that at that exact moment in time, her sisters are dying, which is fucking horrifying.
Yeah.
But also, like, the bitter realization of what's happening right now. God, this movie's good. It's so good.
It's so good. And I think she was just clinging on to the last hope. Like, the boys are so shallow that they're like, oh, we never know why they did it. It's this grand mystery. It's like this weird haunting. But fucking, if they weren't so shallow, they could see that it was because of the mother and it was because of everyone's treatment. You know
exactly.
I mean?
And that's one of the things I think Sofia does amazingly in this film is, despite the fact that the boys are glamorizing these girls, I think that their situation is presented at face value.
Yeah.
Right? Like, any truly compassionate viewer is watching this and going, fuck, I feel for those girls.
Yeah, because they're not treated like real people.
Exactly.
They're treated, like you said, like ghosts, like spirits, like objects.
Yeah, like, they are not living a glamorous life, but for some reason these boys just have these, like, this insane perspective on the situation. I also think it's really interesting. They talk to so many people who have, like, been with Lux.
Yeah.
Right? There's that montage early on with the smell my finger, guys.
Yeah.
And there's Trip, and there are all those boys who she makes out with on the roof and all that stuff. I think it's interesting that basically everyone in the movie can be categorized into either they're in this group of boys who's obsessed with the girls, or they've slept with Lux. That's like the only two categories of people, right? And all of the boys who are part of this obsession group are people who have not actually been with her or any of the other sisters, right? They're like these outsiders looking in, and maybe that's why Lux and the other sisters communicate with them, because they feel like these are the only boys who have some kind of genuine intentions.
I think basically they were their last hope to see if anyone actually truly cared.
Obviously, we're not the best people to talk about this, but I would be really interested to know, like, how this film gets received by, like, young men.
I really wonder if there's anybody who watches this film and just completely doesn't get the message, and they're like, oh, well, the boys are right.
There have to be, right? There have to be people who don't understand how insane this group of boys is and, like, awful it is what they're doing. And I think this is a good lead into my conspiracy theory.
Okay,
right?
let's go.
So Cecilia dies, right? The father's holding her body. And there's this scene later where everyone's seeing Cecilia's ghost, and the father, like, he's walking around the house late at night and the windows open.
And then the daughter's like, don't worry, the fence is gone.
Yeah, and she looks like a ghost, right?
Yeah. It's shot like a horror movie. The curtains are blowing inwards. The windows open. It's so dark and dreary. And then the daughter comes, ghastly white. I genuinely thought one of the other girls was going to kill themselves.
At that, yeah?
Again, I didn't know anything about this film. I thought
the suicides would happen throughout the film,
Throughout
right?
the film,
yeah. It's crazy that they don't, but no, my conspiracy theory is this is not a film about the Lisbon sisters. This is not a film about the boys. This is not a film about sexism. This is not a film about teenagers. No. This is a film about an aviation enthusiast who slowly loses his mind after all of his daughters die.
What?
Hear me out, right?
No, Vaden, this is wild.
Hear me out.
This is wild.
What if all of the sisters died early in the film, and they are essentially, to the boys who are narrating it, they're actually ghosts? The father is this strange character. He has a lot of humor throughout the film, but he's also clearly losing his mind. Okay? There's a scene where he's at the school and he's just like hopping around and he starts talking to the plants.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And then the principal comes up and he's like, Steve or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Your daughters haven't been here in 2 weeks.
And he's like, have you checked out back? Right? He's completely lost his mind. Here's what I'm saying. I think this film, right? Think about it. What if all 5 of the girls commit suicide and the mom and dad have lost their mind and are going on as if they're still alive? What if when the boys go into the house at the end and they find the bodies, what if they've been there for fucking like months?
That literally could have happened when they brought the girls home.
Oh my god.
Because Trip is not there. He walks home.
Yeah.
It's nighttime, and we don't see the parents greet the girls at the door.
See, like, there's something really eerie about this film, and I kind of like this idea that maybe the girls were already dead. I know that the way they're portrayed as ghosts is, like, metaphorical.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting to read it as kind of literal, because the boys at the end are getting these, like, notes and these Morse code signs from across the street, and the girls are, like, ghosts in the window.
And the fact they don't communicate over the phone, it's just through music. Like,
Yeah,
it could be hold music,
exactly,
who knows,
right?
you know?
Or, like, ghosts do all kinds of spooky stuff, and I'm thinking, like, make an interesting horror film.
Like a thriller,
Like
yeah.
a thriller if, these girls, they could have been dead for a long time in that house because no one's gone in.
Wow.
And no one would fucking know that they died if the mom and dad didn't tell anyone. You get cases of this where, like, parents kind of keep pretending their kids are alive after they're dead. And so, like, they just leave the bodies around. I just have this image in my mind of the dad and the mom watching TV like, with the corpses of the girls, thinking that they're still alive. It's dark as fuck.
So, how would you rate the film, Baden?
This one is an easy. I was almost gonna make a rating system based on the sisters, but I feel like that's an awful thing to do. I was gonna be like, how many Lisbon sisters do you rate this out of? No matter what the metric is, this is a 10 out of 10.
I agree. By far my favorite watch of the podcast.
So, yeah, by such like a wide margin.
Like, fuck.
I like The Duelist. I like Piranha too, but this is a different class of film.
This is incredible.
And for a directorial debut, insane.
I really recommend this to anyone who wants to or is thinking of watching this. Again, it is a bit of a heavier topic, but it's a fantastic film. If you haven't watched this one, I highly recommend it.
Go in knowing what you're getting into. If you have any interest in filmmaking, this is a masterclass. It really is like such a rich film.
So I think it's time we dive into the behind the scenes.
Quiet on set.